So Jack, I guess a two-part question in terms of your experience. One of them I already alluded to. You've done a lot of work as a criminal defense attorney, and there's some concerns in the community of how can a guy who's been a criminal defense attorney for all these years be an effective prosecutor. And I think the second part of that question is, you have a lot of cases and appearances where you have failed to show up for a hearing, filed stuff on time, a lot of cases where even just the research I've done over the past few years, you've been either no-show or asking to file things late and had some cases dismissed. And that's a concern. I've heard that over and over again, and if you could address that, it would probably, people would like to hear that.
I'm not sure who you're talking about, but the first part of the question is, and I'll admit, I'm not Perry Mason, okay? 99% of criminal cases settle throughout. That's the national average, 99%, okay? And of the 1% that go to trial, there's about a 98% conviction rate for prosecution. In 2011, I tried 10 cases to final verdict, and I got acquittals in 8. And what I'm saying is, I'm not Perry Mason. There's a problem. There's prosecutors out there who are overcharging. If I'm able to win 80% of cases that they're supposed to win, and it's litigation. I know how to try a case. I know I can look at a case file and I can see where something has been overlooked by the prosecution. It comes with experience. It comes with trying cases. You can say we're a hired gun. I'm a hired gun. I'm going to be a hired gun for Broadwater County. I'm going to bring with me a special skill set that it took me 23 years to hone. And the Bighorn sheep case, that was brought by the Attorney General's Prosecutorial Services Division. Those are the pros. Those are the best prosecutors in the state of Montana. And I beat them 3 times. Maybe I am Perry Mason. And then I alluded to the fact after that, Mr. Luton was indicted federally by the U.S. Attorney's Office, who are the best of the best. Okay? And I'm going to the 9th Circuit on May the 13th to argue that case. And I got a pretty good feeling about it. Again, it's a Class B misdemeanor, which for the 9th Circuit to grant oral argument on a case like that, they're disturbed by what happened. As to the second part of the question, being a sole practitioner, I have balls in the air, and I'm not specific. I'm not sure exactly what cases you're talking about. Sometimes appeals are dismissed at I have a case that recently where my client asked me to dismiss an appeal, but without going into specifics, I really can't answer that. But the bottom line is, I'm a litigator. I'm good at what I do. And because I'm a criminal defense attorney, it does not make me soft on crime. It makes me a good litigator, and I'll be a good litigator for this county.
Now we open it up to questions from the audience, and we'd like you just to ask one question so everyone can have a chance that wants to ask one.
Somebody's got to be first.
You're first.
Mr. Morris, very successful lawyer. Why would you want to come to Broadwater County and obviously take a big decrease in pay?
You haven't seen my tax returns, have you? I grew up in a small county. I'm divorced. My wife is an attorney. She lives in Helena with my 2 young daughters. I want to be close to them, and I want to live in Broadwater County. Pay cut, this isn't a stepping stone job for me. I want to retire as your county attorney. So that answers your question. I want to give back. I've tried cases all over the state of Montana, and I've been pretty damn successful. And I want to be successful here also. For you.
I have a question for both of them.
Okay.
How aggressive will you be in pursuing broken restraining orders against spouses who have in the past abused their spouse?
I can take that first. Well, anytime you get a restraining order, that's a recognition by a judge that somebody could be in danger. You have to take that very seriously. And you have to respond to, particularly if there's a broken restraining order, then that indicates two things. One, there was danger there, and then second, that person disregarded the order of the court to continue to put the other person in danger. And that should be a red alert to a prosecutor, to a county sheriff, that this has to be dealt with aggressively. And I think that goes without saying. I think we've all may be aware of a couple years ago, there was a case in Helena where somebody went and said, we need a restraining order against this lady who's threatening to kill us, and it was a broken marriage, it was a very messy thing. The judge refused to grant the restraining order, and very recently after that, that lady then went and killed her estranged husband. And so that's the kind of thing that you have to take that danger very seriously. So I would be very aggressive with it. And as far as whether that ultimately means they're guilty at the end of the case, I'll treat them fairly like I would anybody else in terms of a fair process. But I will not sit by and let those orders be broken and put people in danger.
Violation of restraining order, if we don't follow the letter of the law and honor our orders that are legally issued by a judge, that's, our society is going to go downhill. So that's paramount. These orders have to be enforced. Normally what happens, especially in domestic law, one spouse will go in and get what's called a temporary restraining order, and there has to be what's called a show cause hearing within 20 days of that order, that ex parte. Ex parte means one side going in and telling the judge, this is what happened, and if the judge finds merit, the judge will issue the order, it gets served on the respondent, and then there's a show cause hearing 20 days later. And if that hearing doesn't take place within 20 days, the order is normally dissolved. The case that Cory talked about in Helena was a tragedy, and there is a bias out there. It was a judge I know, a woman judge, and because it was a man coming in asking for a restraining order against his ex-wife, who obviously had some psychological or mental problems, I think that had something to do with the order not being granted. It was a tragedy all around. And people say, well, it was just a piece of paper. How could it have prevented the tragedy? Well, I talked to a judge, a friend of mine, and we both talked about it. When you get served with a restraining order, it's the sheriff or a deputy or a police officer who is coming to you personally and giving it to you, and you're warned if you violate that, there's going to be consequences. That didn't happen in that case, and it was tragic and it was unfortunate. The same summer that happened, I was representing a college student from Washington State University who his ex-girlfriend had gotten a restraining order from the same judge. She went to Carroll. He's in Washington State. They had a messy breakup, and that same judge signed a restraining order against him. He had to come all the way back from Washington State for the show cause hearing, and the petitioner was on the soccer team at Carroll and had to go on a road trip. She didn't show up. The restraining order was resolved, but and this happened at nearly the same time that tragic murder. So court orders have to be enforced, and if they're not, it's anarchy. But it'd be a very high priority for me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
A question for both candidates. Our current county attorney believes that the Second Amendment relates to squirrel hunting. Could you give us what you think about the Second Amendment and if there's a potential threat here locally?
I've never been squirrel hunting. It's very clear what it stands for, and the Supreme Court has said what it stood for. And it's number one, that you have a right to keep and bear arms, and the Congress shall not infringe on that, and states shall not infringe on that. And second, it's not just a militia, it's an individual right of possession by us as American citizens. And that's crystal clear. So I don't know if there's any further debate that can be had at this point. The county attorney's job is certainly well, really any county or state government's job is to defend someone's right to keep and bear arms.
We have that right embodied in both the federal and state constitution. The United States Supreme Court recently has struck down, Washington, D.C. had, basically all firearms were banned from in the district, and that has been struck down. My job as county attorney would be to make sure that the laws as written by our legislature regarding firearms are adhered to. But firearms are not inherently evil or bad. This is the state of Montana. We all grew up with them. And I don't squirrel hunt either. And I don't know specifically, Tim, what you're referring to about what the county attorney may or may not have said. But again, it's the law of the land, the law of the state, and as far as I'm concerned, it's inviolate. I mean, we have that right in the Bill of Rights.
Our present government, it seems that our Attorney General at the federal level seems to pick and choose what laws that he wants to enforce. As an attorney and as a lawyer for the county, are we going to follow that same rule, or are we just going to actually enforce the laws that are on the books?
You want to go first, or will you go?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the U.S. Attorney General Holder recently said, and he was specifically talking about laws against same-sex marriage. And he said, Attorneys General of the state, you don't have to enforce that. It's clearly unconstitutional, so just don't enforce it and go ahead and tell the courts that it's unconstitutional and they just need to strike it down. And it's amazing that we are in a time now where that's viewed as just almost flippantly and cavalierly as that's clearly unconstitutional. Any point prior to this in human history, no one has looked at that and said, that's an absolutely unacceptable law. In fact, we've been built on a civilization that believed in that and adhered to it. But the other point you have here is just, can the attorney decide to pick and choose what laws they enforce? The answer to that is no. You absolutely can't do that. If you do that, what you've done is you've changed the Constitution. You've said you've got a House of Representatives at the state or federal level. You've got a Senate. They pass the law. They send it to the governor or the president. That chief executive signs it, and then you have to enforce it. But wait, we forgot. There's one more step. You go to the Attorney General who has to defend it in court, and you have to convince him or her, depending on who's in the office, depending on what day of the week it is, depending on what pet issue it is, and convince them that they have to defend the law. It's nonsense. It's not just nonsense. It's gonna undermine the foundation of our constitutional government. So if the law is on the books, if it's been passed legally, then it's the attorney's job to enforce it. If a court ultimately strikes it down, or the legislature ultimately changes it, that may be what they do under that system. But the attorney's job is not to pick and choose. The attorney's job is to represent the people and to enforce the laws faithfully to the best of their ability.
Just so I understand your question, you're talking about Attorney General Holder, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, this is a prime example. When Montana, prior to the last change in the medical marijuana law, do you remember how the feds came in and prosecuted all of these, well, people who were thought they were adhering to state law? There was something called the Holder letter out there that he basically wrote that said, as long as these medical marijuana providers are following state law, we're not going to prosecute. Well, that was a lie. He came in here and we all know what he did. And now we've got the state of Washington and the state of Colorado where they've legalized marijuana completely, and the federal government doesn't know what the hell to do about it. And the states, and again, as a county attorney, I hope I never have to deal with Mr. Holder or any U.S. attorney, but unfortunately that's the way it is, you know? Each administration, I'm sorry?
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, but unfortunately that's the way this administration and this Attorney General seems to be handling things. It's very dysfunctional. Could you imagine if the state of California legalized marijuana? It's a state of 38 million people. I think it's the eighth largest it's the eighth largest economy in the world. There was a initiative a couple years ago, and the medical marijuana producers spent millions of dollars campaigning against it, and the law failed. But boy, if California would have gone, I don't know what the federal government would have done. I mean, they would have been, what are you going to do? You're going to only prosecute crimes in little states like Montana and let California, well now Colorado and Washington get away. It's dysfunctional, it doesn't make sense. Nobody can can explain it to me where there's any rationalization behind it other than politics. So I don't agree with everything that happens that comes out of Washington. But it changes slowly, and with each election cycle, I think we the people who we vote into office slowly changes things for the better.
My name is Kyle Hopstead. Cory, you alluded to some knotheads you dealt with. I think, Jack, you talked about a fist fight that you witnessed. We have contention in the county, and I'm glad you talked a little bit about it. What can you do to minimize that and get us down to the facts and help our governing bodies work in a more unified way?
Well, again, it comes down to, I think, experience and judgment. I met John Flynn in 1991 as a clerk, and I practiced with him and against him, both criminally and civilly. And that was one thing about John. You know, I might lose a case, but I'm not going to hold it against John. Okay, I always left John with a feeling of goodwill, and we did our best. And you got to be able to put that behind you and be a professional. I can't tell politicians to get along. You know, all I can do is try to facilitate rationale and reason and give my advice as to what the legal issue is. But again, politics, it ain't beanbag, as somebody said once. And yeah, we had a fist fight break out in a town council meeting over water meters. And not only was I a witness, but I ended up prosecuting that case. And the defense lawyer from Bozeman tried to get the judge to throw me off the case because he said I was a witness. But again, it all comes down to civility. It comes down to sitting down and talking about our differences. But again, you can't force someone to change their view or their emotion. But you know, it's democracy, and it's not always pretty. But it's the best system we have. And I would personally, I would try to meet every department head. I would try every week. I would make my rounds, and I would try to develop a cordial relationship and start there. But again, I think you know, politics at the local level, it's the most real, and it can get quite emotional. But I don't think it's something that is unsolvable. It just, we have to grow up and do what's best for our community.
I think there's a couple of things that can be done. I'll first start with procedural things, and then I'll talk more about the harder part. Procedurally, I think that there's a lot of mistrust in the community, some of which I think honestly is genuine, and some of it I think is people just like to stir up dust. And a lot of that can be reduced with things that will just help the foreseeability of what's going to happen. In other words, the county commission is going to take an action on Tuesday. If there's a way, this is what I would ask as a county attorney. Can I see it on Thursday so I can do research on Friday, and I can come back to you before the meeting and say, here's one weird law in the code that I found that I didn't know about, and so make sure that you deal with this issue. And here's a procedural thing that might make sense because I saw this work in another county or another, whatever. And I think there may be some ways that I would ask as a county attorney to give me time to actually do the legal research and be able to provide them, as a county commission, guidance on there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And I recommend you take these steps. I'm not telling you what decision to make or what policy to enact. I'm telling you that here are some legal requirements that if you meet, then everybody's job will be easier. And I think the other part of that goes with, go ahead and let the citizens see this thing in advance and give them the time to vet it, give them the time to do their own research. They can come in and talk to me, and I can't give them legal advice, but I can say, here's the legal advice I gave to the county commission, and it's, it's in writing, and take it home and study it. So just procedurally, I think there's some things we can do to eliminate some of this concern, some of which is genuine, and some of which I think is some people just need to say, I'm just going to have to agree to disagree. But I think there'd be a way to deal with some of that. The harder part is the human part. The harder part is people who either hate each other, don't want to get along, whatever it may be. And you know, Jack's right that there's some amount of that you can't change. But there is a lot of that you can change. I really believe you can change. I've worked with teams, I've led teams, where I had people in the team that literally, on probably a weekly basis, I'm bringing them in my office and I'm sitting them down and I'm saying, you don't realize how negative your attitude is. People walk in the door and you give them the look that says that you wish they were dead. And talk to them on a close personal basis where at the end of the conversation, grown men literally cry and apologize, and we pray together, and we come out of that with a commitment to work better. And then guess what? The next week we're back and they're having the same conversation. but sometimes that's what it takes as a personal level to say, we have got to work together as a team. And I really believe, I've been saying this in the newspaper, I've been saying this to people around, this is a team. This county government is a team. And we have to start thinking like a team and acting like a team and communicating like a team. And guess what? We're going to start performing like a team. We're going to start winning. And winning, right now we're not winning. Right now we're losing. If you make up the scorecard, hate letters every week in the newspaper, that's not a sign of winning, that's a sign of losing. But we can win. And I'll talk about this more when I close tonight. But I believe there's a way to win, and I believe there's a way to start growing closer together. And it starts first, I think, with some procedural things so people just trust you. But I think a lot of it's going to be personal relationships. Going to each county commissioner individually and saying, hey, let's work together. Please just help me out. Going to the sheriff. Go and saying, if I screw up a case or you're mad at me or your deputies think that I completely blew it on the stand, come tell me and I'll do better. And that human dynamic is the hardest part, but it's the most important part. It's the ingredient that's going to move us towards winning.
Okay. I think we'll close now, and if you have questions for them individually, with your question, or did you have one, sir? You would like to?
You kind of touched on it a little bit with reading the newspaper, and I've been to a couple of meetings before. And one of the things that seems to prevail is meetings behind, when the meetings aren't in session. Is there anything we can do about that?
I'll answer that if you want to answer it after me. So here's what you have to understand about the Montana Constitution. The Montana Constitution says every board, commission, etc. will have open meetings, okay? And people often don't know really what that means. And you know certainly from your time in the legislature. If there's a committee and there's enough people in that committee together to make a quorum, and they're there unless they're at the after-hours social, that's considered a meeting. If they start talking about business and they can carry something out, that's considered a meeting. So you've got to be able to notice that and tell people that that's on the agenda. So if you've got 3 commissioners, then 2 of them together working on business would be considered a meeting and it needs to be open. I don't believe that means that if they meet in aisle 5 of the grocery store, it's a meeting and they have to run the other way. I really don't believe that. But what I do believe is that there needs to be a commitment to saying we're going to schedule meetings and then we're going to notice meetings. Because I've won cases where I challenged a commission who did something that they didn't notice, and the Constitution is very clear, and the state statute is that you have got to provide notice in advance so the public's informed as to what's going on. This is not hard. All it takes is discipline to keep doing it on a regular basis, and then bringing that quorum together to talk about business. So what I would do is lay out, here's what a quorum is, which would be 2 commissioners that are there to even discuss business or to vote on anything or to come up with a plan. Again, if they happen to go to the same church, I don't think that's a meeting and we need to not just get our hair on fire over that. But laying out that kind of clarity, I think will help people understand what they can expect from their county commission, and then their county commission, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but the county commission has to be able to do their schedule accordingly so that they are there when the public expects them to be there and the public can hear what they're saying.
I think Ben Franklin said it, something to the effect that sunshine is the best disinfectant. That means open government. That nothing should be done behind closed doors, but there are 2 exceptions to that. And I've been involved. One is dealing with employee issues. Employees have a right to privacy when it comes to a public forum, but they can waive that right. I was the city attorney in Whitehall, and there was a public employee issue, and the employee came to the commission meeting, with his attorney, and they asked to have the meeting closed, and the mayor refused to close it, obstinately refused to close it, and he stalemated us. And so the meeting broke up, because I advised the commission, without waiver from that employee, we're facing a lawsuit. And the mayor is trying to fire this fella, but he wasn't going to give him the benefit of a closed meeting. The other time it's appropriate and necessary is when there's litigation involving a city or a county government, when the leaders are meeting with their legal representative. And it's just like in any other civil lawsuit, there's attorney-client privilege, there's work product discovery that you don't want the other side to know what your strategy is. So those are times when meetings do have to be closed. And I agree with Cory. When commissioners or elected officials run into each other on the street, I don't believe that constitutes a quorum or a meeting. And again, it's a fine act, but I don't think it is that hard. And it's, well, we've been doing it for 220 some years now as a country. But again, I'm for openness. I'm for nothing done behind closed doors. It's the government of the people, by the people, for the people. But the citizens we have to take part, and we have to hold our elected officials accountable. And I think that's real important. It's easy to point the finger and say this happened or that happened, but we as citizens have to come together, come to these meetings. I told you about 2.5 years of me drafting public notices and no one showing up to these meetings, and then all of a sudden when it's time to start the project, well, how did this happen? Well, there's 55 public notices that I noticed up and published. So, it's not just the government, the people have to be engaged and involved and demand openness. And I think we do to a large degree. And again, we're held hostage by the Supreme Court, where they are at that particular term, what a decision is. But I'm for open government and nothing done behind closed doors, other than if it's an employee right issue or if it has to do with litigation involving the county. So that's where I stand on that. So thank you for, I guess, the Broadwater Reporter and the Rod and Gun Club and the Cattlewoman Association and Cory. I really enjoyed this forum. What I bring to this position, if I am elected, I bring experience. I've represented small business men, I've represented large businesses. My aunt and uncle used to run a bulk fuel distributorship down in the Jefferson Valley called Connor Exxon. And they had the contract, not only, they delivered to all the ranches, but they also had the contract with the Golden Sunlight Mine, which was a pretty valuable contract. And I tell you what, I was continually fighting with Town Pump and a family called the Canellis, who kept trying to undercut them. But the Town Pump stayed, the Golden Sunlight stayed with the local business. And I helped make that happen. I've represented ranchers, I've represented individuals, I've done probate law. That's one of the things that you don't talk about, but if someone dies in a county, it's the county attorney or the county administrator's job to probate that person's estate. And it happens a lot in the smaller counties. I've done a lot of probate work, I've done a lot of litigation, I've advised city councils, I've had oral argument before the Supreme Court on behalf of the town of Whitehall, and I was successful. Again, I believe that the best government is the government works when it's closest to the people, like we have right here. I don't think we need to rely on Helena or the Attorney General's office telling us how to run government here in Broadwater County. I think you've been doing a pretty good job of it, and it ebbs and flows, like everything else in life. But I don't plan on using this position as a stepping stone. I would like to retire in this office, and I bring 23 years of practical small town attorney experience. I've represented, like I said, small business, large business, people without money, people with money. I put a lien on the Yellowstone Club. That's one of my One of the things I'm most proud of. Especially when the law firm from Portland told me they were going to cut me in half with a chainsaw if I didn't release the lien. Well, the lien got released after my client who did the work. He had employees to pay, he had loans to pay, he had equipment to pay for $800,000. This is a small contractor out of Whitehall. He got paid, and I'm proud of that. But I handed out my resume, and I've worked all kinds of jobs growing up, and I've tried all kinds of cases, and I'm looking forward on Sunday. I'm flying out to Seattle. I'm going to be arguing before the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals on behalf of a Montana businessman who got caught up in the politics of personal destruction. And I'm proud of representing him, and I'd be proud to represent this county. Thank you.
Well, I think Jack is doing a great job. I think he should keep doing what he's doing. No, I'm in the National Guard, and I supervise a number of soldiers. My particular position, I'm a major, and I have a sergeant major who's a D9 senior NCO, and I have 4 captains and 2 lieutenants and about 12 other soldiers who work for me in my particular section. And I've had some absolutely outstanding young soldiers and officers work for me. And last year I had my best captain, who was just, he's a stud. He's really aggressive. He's got combat experience in Iraq. He's a great leader. And we were sending him out to command a company, which is, you don't keep your best people. You send them out to command and lead the soldiers in front. And my last day with him, I'm talking to him as he's leaving to go command his company. And I was talking to him, and the thing that's great about this guy is he's really smart, and he demands the highest standards. But he also, because of that, is critical of people who are not at that level. And it's a problem that I've talked to him a few times about. And so as he's getting ready to leave that day, I said, you've got a choice. You are going to be a force for change, but it's up to you. Are you going to be a positive force for change or a negative force for change? And that's the decision that's before us today, and that's the decision that's before all of you as voters and the other people that are running for office. We will be a force for change, but will we be positive or will we be negative? And I'm committing to you, I'll be a positive force for change. I talked about teamwork earlier, and I talked about winning. And I want to tell you what winning looks like in my mind. Winning looks like a county attorney talking to a sheriff and talking to a detective about a really hard case, and coming in on a Sunday and working on it, and working again on a Monday night, and working again on a Tuesday night, and getting all the details right, and calling that victim on a Thursday morning and saying, we're going to take care of you, and then filing that thing on a Thursday. Because we spent the time to get it right. Not because we filed it, it was screwed up, we had to pull it back and do it again, and nothing ever happened, or we never did anything with the case, and we never called the victim. That's winning. Talking to the county commission and giving them advice on the law up front so they make a decision that everyone recognizes as legal and no one is claiming a suspect. The deal's in, it's all crooked. That's winning. Coming together as a community and listening to people that come in your door and have a simple question rather than slamming the door and saying, I don't work for you, I work for the county, I can't give you legal advice. That's winning, and that's what I want to do. I want to win, and I want, not just me, I want our team to win, and I want our team to commit to come together and to work together for you, because you demand our best. You should, because we work for you. You don't work for us. And you are not getting the best right now. And I'm only one small part of it, but I hope to do really well with my part, and I will give you my best.
I want to thank both of you candidates, and of course the Broadwater Reporter and Groton Gun Club, but most of all I want to thank the people who were interested enough to come and listen to these candidates before you mark your ballot. Thank you.
Just a reminder, everyone, next Thursday, same place, we have a county commissioner forum, so mark your calendars at 6 o'clock, and I hope to see you. Thank you for coming, and have a good
Yes.